British Parliament passed legislation to levy new taxes and bring order to far-flung trading empire. The taxes that were imposed were the Sugar Act, which were the imposition of taxes on molasses, the Stamp Act, taxes on publications and legal documents, Townshend Act, taxes on a wide variety of imported items, Tea Act, with taxes on tea, and the Quartering Act, which required colonists to provide housing and accommodations for British troops. As a response, the colonists argued that they should govern their own affairs, and responded with the slogan, "No taxation without representation." They boycotted British products, physically attacked British officials, mounted protests such as the Boston Tea Party that occurred in 1773, in which colonists dumped a cargo of tea in the Boston harbor instead of paying dues for the tea, and also the Continental Congress, which in 1774 coordinated the colony's resistance to British policies. A year later, in 1775, British troops and a colonial militia skirmished at the village of Lexington. The War of the American Independence had begun. On July 4, 1776, Continental Congress adopted the document, the Unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America, in which they declared the following: full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. They too have been deaf to the voice of injustice. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
These United States are and of right to be free and independent states. They are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and all political connections are to be dissolved.
In 1778, a new system of government, known as the Constitution of the United States, was created. It emphasized the rights of individuals based on popular sovereignty, and they agreed to follow written constitution guaranteeing individuals' liberties, like freedom of speech, of the press, and of religion. It didn't grant political and legal equality to all inhabitants, accorded full rights to only men of property. In the 1780s, French royal government revenue went to pay off war debts. King Louis XVI sought to increase taxes on the French nobility. As a result, aristocrats protested, so they forced Louis to summon the Estates General, an assembly that represented the entire French population that consisted of 3 estates, the first being the Roman Catholic clergy, the second, the nobles, and the third, which also was the most abundant, were the 24 million serfs, freemen, and urban residents. On June 17, 1789, representatives of the Third Estate seceded from the name Estates General and proclaimed themselves to be the National Assembly. A little than a month later, on July 14, 1789, a Parisian crowd, fearing that the king would undo events of the previous weeks, stormed the Bastille in search of weapons. In August 1789, the National Assembly undertook a broad program of political and social reform, influenced by the American revolutionary ideas. They established the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, which proclaimed the equality of all men, declared sovereignty resided in the people, and asserted individual rights to liberty, property, and security. In 1792, the Convention was created. They were a new legislative body elected by universal manhood suffrage that abolished the monarchy and proclaimed France a republic. In 1793, King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette went to the guillotine when the convention found them guilty of treason. Maximilien Robespierre and the Jacobin Party dominated the convention. Robespierre was a ruthless but popular radical known as the Incorruptible and dominated the Committee of Public Safety. The Jacobins believed that France needed complete restructuring. In July 1794, the convention arrested Robespierre and his allies, convicted them of tyranny, and they were sent to the guillotine. A group of conservative men seized power and ruled France under a new institution known as the Directory. They were unable to resolve economic problems, and in November 1799, the Directory came to an end when General Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup d'etat and seized power. Peasant rebellion led by Miguel de Hidalgo, rallying indigenous people and mestizos against colonial rule. Many thought it was a social and economic warfare. He was captured, then executed. September 16, 1810 is the national holiday, the day that he proclaimed his revolt. In 1821, Agustin de Iturbide declared independence, then dedicated himself as the emperor. In South America, Simón Bolívar led a movement of independence. He assembled an army crushing the Spanish army. There were many movements to end slave trade. William Wilberforce attacked slavery, and in 1807 Parliament passed his bill to end slave trade. Slavery was abolished in 1829 in Mexico, 1833 in Britain, 1848 in France, 1865 in the US, 1886 in Cuba, and 1888 in Brazil. In 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft published a vindication of the rights of women, saying how all women had all the rights that men possess.
All women have the same rights that men possess.
In October 1789, 6,000 Parisian women marched to the Versailles to protest the high price of bread.
Lower the prices of bread. No more.
Can't feed my family.
No, I can't feed my family. Do you hear me? I cannot feed my family.
In 1838, a Central American Federation was formed, but divided into independent states, known as Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica.